Hello, everyone. This is criminal profiler Pat Brown, and today I want to talk about the case of Hannah Overton. This is the lady here. She was a mom of five. She took in a foster child who she was planning to adopt with her husband. His name is Andrew, and three and a half months into being in her home, he died. Not in her home, but he became very ill, and eventually at the hospital he died. She was convicted of murdering him, that she had poisoned him with salt, and that she hadn't provided medical care in a timely fashion, and she was put in prison. Eventually, this decision was overturned. Now, let me just give you a kind of a quick run through with some simple photos to help you understand the case. This was her family. She was 29 years old at the time, I believe, and they had their own biological children, church-going family, apparently a happy little family there, happy kids, and then she decided to. She and her husband decided to take in a foster child. So here's the basics of it. She spent 7 years in prison after she was sentenced in 2007 to life without parole for the death of 4-year-old Andrew Burd, a boy she had planned to adopt with her husband. Now, on October 3rd, 2006, 4-year-old Andrew Burd died of salt poisoning. At least that was the claim by the prosecution. All right. Prosecutors said that Hannah Overton snapped and force-fed Andrew large amounts of spicy seasoning. Larry and Hannah Overton, who were adopting Andrew, were charged with capital murder. Both of them were actually charged. He was not home at the time that Andrew became ill. He was then, what happened was after he became, something seemed to be wrong with him. Hannah called Larry and asked him to come home. He came home, and then too much time passed, apparently, before they took him to get any kind of help. So that's why he was charged as well. A jury believed Overton did not get Andrew medical help in time, and on September 7, 2007, she was convicted. She was automatically sentenced to life in prison. Now here she's reunited. Okay, so what happened was her husband got a kind of a plea deal after she was convicted, and he got probation, and he was able to go home and take care of the kids. Now, after she was now released, she's now reunited with her husband and 5 kids, and I believe she had one more. Okay, what happened along the way? Her lawyers fought for her. They fought for her conviction during that time, but there were doctors that testified a rare medical condition likely killed Andrew. And I'm going to talk about these rare medical conditions and how rare medical conditions are often used in cases where mothers end up being charged with killing their children. Now, sometimes these true rare medical conditions can exist, but sometimes they're just used as it could be because, we don't exactly know why the child died, so it could be this, so how can you charge this person? Because you could be wrong, and then you're putting an innocent person in prison and saying that she killed a child when it was some weird medical condition she had no control over. And that is concerning. A prosecutor who was once against Overton testified in her defense. In 2014, the state's Court of Criminal Appeals overturned Overton's conviction, and she was freed on bail. And let's say the next. So essentially, the prosecutor decided not to take it back to court again. He just made that decision not to retry the case. Then what happened was she was entitled to state compensation. She got $600,000, and she can't be tried again. And then the district attorney, the one who didn't take it back to court, said he intends to declare Overton innocent, and I believe that did happen. So, okay. A lot of people are really happy about this because they believe she was innocent, that, she took in this child with all her heart to help a child who needed care. She was going to give him a good home. They were this family that wanted to help other children, not only their biological children, but other children. And I totally support that. And before I go further, I want to talk along with what I'm going to introduce to you as to why there's a lot more information that isn't being put out to the public because it's actually in the appeals, as to why this is a very difficult case to say, is she really innocent or did she really do something? I'll get to that. But first, I just want to explain where I come from. I'm a parent of 2 biological children. I have one adopted son who was in the foster care system pretty much as long as Andrew was. He was in there till he was approximately 4 years old with foster parents. Then he went to a pre-adopt home, one of these situations where you go into the home that wishes to adopt you, but you have to stay there for a year in foster care, under foster care, and make sure it takes, and then you adopt after the year is up. After almost a year was up, they changed their mind and sent my son back to foster care. And this is important, and I want to bring this up for a particularly good reason. What happened is that sometimes when people want to adopt a child out of foster care and they already have other children that they have raised since birth, they are used to, especially if they're good parents with parenting, they're used to children behaving very well, following the rules. They're still children. They do some stuff, but generally speaking, listening to their parents, respecting their parents, and loving their parents. And they're used to that. And then when they bring a foster child in who's been in foster care for years, that child often comes in without the same kind of emotional stability. And he does have issues when he comes into the home. He doesn't act the same way. He sometimes doesn't connect with the parents. And they feel like he's alienated from them. And he does things they don't feel comfortable with. And he doesn't get along with the other children so well necessarily. There are all kinds of things can happen. So they can become very frustrated and then say, we can't do this. So anyway, my son went back to foster care. I adopted him then. I brought into my home for the same 1-year foster care system. But when I brought him into my home, I had made a decision right up front. And I said, look, when he walked in the door, this is your home. I'm your mom. This is your dad. This is your brother. This is your sister. And you will never leave this home. This is your home. Of course, he didn't believe me, but, and I had to go through a lot of those issues that the other family went through because he didn't trust anybody and he was insecure in all these issues. It was a difficult time. And eventually, yes, by hanging in and loving him and, going through the process, eventually he began to realize he wasn't going to be thrown out again. This was his family that he should be with. And now, then we adopted him after the end of the year. And now he's turning 39 this year. So, and a great guy he is. So, it all worked out well for my family. But I can tell you, it's not an easy transition. And sometimes when people already have children and they bring another child into their home, they think it's all going to be peachy, that this child is just going to come in and they're just going to adapt really well and they're going to be just like the other children right away. And it doesn't work that way. And they can become very, very frustrated. So I just want to point that out. I also was the foster parent of a pregnant teenage deaf child who was 13 when she came to my home. She was in my care for a year, and that was a very tough time. And I loved her very much. And it was really a frustrating time because of the foster care system. And so I didn't have a super happy ending. So I know what it's like to deal with the foster care system and to bring in a child to your home. And I know what struggles that Hannah and her husband may have gone through. And I do not believe that the foster care system properly helps people understand this. I really think they failed dismally in this. A lot of times they even lie, like, oh, the child is absolutely perfect and nothing will ever go wrong. And and it's not true, especially if a child has been abused. Okay, so in this particular case, the Overtons, let me read you this. The Overtons, they were in the process of adopting his child when he was placed in their home on June 16th, 2006, yes. And he became ill in October 2006. So we're talking June, July, August, September. Okay, less than 4 months, 3.5 months. something had gone wrong, dreadfully wrong. Now, I want to point out what his background was, because I think this is important, and to understand A, what could have happened, and B, why it could have happened. Okay, so what happened was Andrew was removed from his biological mother's home due to neglect and abuse, and I believe there were drugs involved. Okay, and then it says his foster mother, before the Overtons took him in, her name was Sharon Hamill. She fostered him for about 18 months. Okay, so let's do some math here, and I'm going to do it badly because I suck at math here. So anyway, so the foster mother only had him for 18 months, and he got to them when he was about 4, somewhere in a 4ish. Okay, so he was in his biological mother's home for 2.5 years, something like that. A home of neglect and abuse. So now we have a child, baby born into a situation where he's being abused and neglected. That is not a healthy child. And he's gone through a lot of torment. Okay. He may have attachment disorder, which is very common among children who've been in foster care, come out of these situations where they can't attach to people very well. He probably had some of that. Okay. So now he's been in his biological home, and then he's pulled and he's put in this foster home. Now, she says she has fostered approximately 300 children. So this is not a foster home that plans to adopt the children. This is a foster home where kids come through until they find another place. And she's done a lot of this. She probably has a good heart, but then again, some people do it for the money. So I don't know. But anyway, she got the child. Now, first of all, this is a second trauma of his life. The first trauma is being born into a biological family that abused and neglected him. The second trauma is being taken away from that family. Maybe they're crappy, but that is the only family he knows. And he's being kidnapped out of that family and put in another family. Okay. That's the way a baby would look at it. Not that he didn't need to leave it, but okay. Now he's being put in another location where kids come and go and come and go and come and go. Okay. Interesting. All right. So now the problem comes down to, all right. So now he spends, how long was that again? 18 months with her. So 1.5 years, he's with this other person. She says she never had any trouble with him. He didn't act in any weird way. He was obedient. He didn't eat lots of things that he shouldn't have eaten. None of that happened. So the foster mother says that whatever she claims about his behaviors is not true when he was in foster care with her. I don't know if she's telling the truth or not, but she has a lot of kids. Maybe she has specific rules on when she feeds them, and the kids she doesn't allow the children to get into the cabinets. I don't know. She says she didn't have any problem with him. All right. So from about 2.5 to 4, he's with his foster parent. Then they decide they might like to adopt this child. And the foster mother and Hannah are in the same church. So the foster mother's going, oh, cool, this is good, because he'll go to her home, which I think is a good home. They're nice people and have other children, and he'll blend right in, and I can still see him at church, and that'll help his transition. I'm in agreement with the foster parent on that. At least the whole connection isn't broken. Okay. So cool. All right. That's awesome. Now, okay. So now the child is now pulled out of the next home. Now, even if the transition is helped by the church thing, still, Andrew is now being pulled out of a second home, taken away from the second mother he knows. In his opinion, that's a mother. Now that mother's gone too. And now he's tossed with this mother. And this mother already has a bunch of other kids. So the next 3.5 months, or whatever he stayed there for, which I think is 3.5, didn't really go very well from what I'm reading here. And we're not necessarily reading that when you see the Innocence Project type thing. I don't know if was it Innocence Project or just her lawyers or whatever got her off of this charge. They make it sound a lot better than I think it was. I think she had a lot of problems with him. And I get it. I personally think that social services failed as usual with the concept of moving a child without a lot of support and maybe saying this is not an appropriate home for him. because she's got all these other children she has raised and are all well behaved and all that nonsense. And then we got this kid coming in who's like, and he starts acting out because the other children have toys and he wants to play with their toys. And then they don't want him to play with their toys. And then he breaks their toys. And then she gets mad at him and all these kind of things. And is he really being accepted? The other kids, are they really saying, hey, we're so happy we have this little new annoying brother that doesn't seem to follow the rules? It's not that easy. So unless you get tremendous support, I think you can have a child who is so difficult to deal with. And then when he starts having problems and he can't connect to the parents, he starts acting out in ways that are very unpleasant. Parents can become very, very frustrated, and frustration often ends up being some kind of retaliation thing because they don't know what to do with it. It would be better if they simply went to social services and said, look, we can't handle this child, let's put him back in foster care, or we need a tremendous amount of support because this is not working out. But a lot of times they don't want to admit that, so they keep trying to fix it, and it's not necessarily easy to fix. So I want to bring all that up just so you understand sort of the background here. Now, let me basically explain what the story is, and I'm going to read you from the actual appeals process so you can understand where I think she was at fault. I don't think she intentionally killed him, but I think there were a lot of things she did that were inappropriate and were very concerning, and she would not have done to one of her biological children. And this boy deserved to have a life and not have it taken away from him. So I have some issues with the determination that she should walk scot-free. I mean, yes, she did spend 7 years in prison, so maybe that was enough. But the concept that she didn't do anything inappropriate bothers me. So anyway, let me just read you from this explanation, and then I'm going to go to some of the actual details that are being kind of like hidden from the public. Okay, so I'm going to read you here. On October 2nd, 2006, 29-year-old Hannah Overton and her husband Larry brought Andrew Burd, their 4-year-old foster son, whom they were in a process of adopting. What? Wait, I'm reading this. Who wrote this? What? Okay, I didn't see this before. Now that I see this, I'm really concerned. This is written from the National Registry of Exonerations. Now, mind you, a lot of times you read crap on the net, it is crap. Sometimes it's even not even from the country that speaks the same language, but it's somehow interpreted into English from some other, it's some weird thing that happens. And then you read it and you're like, wow, this English is really weird. And it's because somebody wrote it who doesn't know English or was retranslated or whatever. And you get mistakes. And you're like, okay, this is just kind of junk, So I don't know who wrote this, but this is from the National Registry of Exonerations. It says, Hannah Overton and her husband Larry brought Andrew Burd, who they were in the process of adopting, to a hospital in Corpus Christi, Texas. They did not bring him to a hospital. That is a complete lie. They did not. They took him to one of those crappy urgent care centers down the street, that you go to when you sprain your ankle. No, urgent care centers are never meant to be, that's not your place of choice when you have a critical situation. That's where you go when you're not feeling good and you don't want to pay the emergency room fees. So you go and you say, I got this problem. My foot hurts or this hurts. I busted my finger. Something they can do with, a splint or something. You do not take a person in critical condition to an urgent care center. And if you do, which is one of the problems with this entire case, which is what they did, you're negligent. I'm sorry. That's absolute negligence. And they're saying here in the National Registry of Exonerations that they took him to a hospital in Corpus Christi, Texas. No, they did not. After the boy stopped breathing, the boy is diagnosed with toxic salt overdose. He ended up at a hospital, but because he was transferred. The boy was diagnosed with a toxic salt overdose and died that following day. 10 days later, the Overtons were arrested and charged with capital murder. Prosecutors said Hannah forced the boy to drink water laced with Cajun spices as a punishment for misbehaving. The prosecution claimed the boy vomited and was in and out of consciousness. but the couple waited nearly 3 hours before seeking medical help. Okay. And a lot of that is true, so I'm going to explain why that's true. Police said that one of Overton's 5 biological children told investigators that Hannah watched Andrew on a security camera in a bedroom, and they did have security camera in his bedroom. And some of the reason for that is I don't have a problem with it, actually, because when you have a child who has some emotional problems and is adjusting, that you might want to keep your eye on him, I don't have a problem with that. So I don't consider that negligent. I consider that actually, paying attention to what's going on. But the children said that she used food and pepper as a form of punishment. Now, I don't know. I haven't seen all the children's, all the way they were interviewed and all that. So I'm going to put that aside. A neighbor told police that Hannah called her about 3 p.m. that day and asked her to watch one of her children because Andrew was intentionally vomiting and defecating and smearing it everywhere. So, and that is, she did say that. The neighbor said Hannah claimed Andrew was vomiting and defecating, not because he was sick, but to get to me. And that also may be true. I can't say it's not, because when you have a child who is not adjusting and is very frustrated, they can do these kind of unpleasant things. And they do it in revenge. That can happen. So I'm not saying I doubt that with her either. So then what happened was, let's see. All right. So the Overtons were granted separate trials. Hannah went to trial in 2007. And and the medical examiner testified the boy died of salt poisoning and appeared to have blunt head trauma. And let's see, goes on further that the Hannah told the doctor at the hospital that he had eaten a bowl of chili. And when he asked for more and threw a fit, she gave him a glass of water with chili powder in it. In other words, and I'll read her actual words on this. So the concept was that she sprinkled a wee bit of some spicy stuff in a water thing just to, help him calm down because he couldn't get to eat the chili anymore. Okay. So, and then it goes on about the different things that supposedly happened. And I want to read her words and what everybody said as opposed to their version of it here. And, now they're admitting it later on here. This is kind of funny. And this does explain a bit of this. Now, this is what she told the jury, which is why this is so concerning. So he wanted this chili, and she decided, she wasn't going to give him more chili because he ate too much of it. So she put this mixture in a cup and gave it to him, a little sprinkle thing, supposedly. And she told the jury that after a 20-minute tantrum, he tumbled to the floor and was cold and vomited. Overton testified that she thought that he had gotten himself so worked up that he threw up. She telephoned her husband, told him to come home, but before he arrived, Andrew began to shake, so she wrapped him in a blanket and put him in a bed with a heating pad. After consulting her intermediate EMT course book, Overton said she thought he might have been in some kind of shock, but she wasn't overly concerned because of his his overwrought behavior on other occasions. So they put him in a warm bath and they used a nebulizer. But then he started not breathing properly and moaning. His breathing became abnormal. And then as he became less responsive, they drove him to an urgent care center. So, in the beginning of the thing, they said they took him to a hospital. In the middle of it, they say urgent care center, which is the truth. Okay. On the way, he stopped breathing. And Overton began CPR. The boy vomited into her mouth and began breathing again. And when they were getting out of the car, he stopped breathing again. And then it goes on and it shows she dies. The jury convicted her of capital murder based on the fact that she had not gotten him prompt medical attention, but that she force-fed, and not so much because she force-fed him this mixture, but more because after doing so, what looked like very concerning symptoms, she just didn't take him to the hospital. And one of her claims, by the way, and we're going to get into that more, is that she did not have Medicaid for him. And so she was trying to avoid going to the hospital because of the cost. Okay. let me stop there for a second and just talk about that. I have never heard of a kid who's in the foster care system. And even though she had brought him into her home, he's still in the foster care system. The foster care system is responsible for his Medicaid. So I do not understand this issue about the Medicaid. And even if she didn't have Medicaid, you would never, ever, I think if it been one of her other children, she would have rushed the child, she would have called 911 and got, pay for the ambulance, pay for whatever, because she wanted to save her child's life. But for some reason, in this case, because she said he didn't have medical insurance, and later on she did say probably the people in the church would have come forth and helped out. Well, yeah, because here's another story I can tell you. One of my sons, different son, not my adopted son, my other son, when he was born, 3 weeks after he was born, he suddenly got running a really high fever. And I knew from the way he was moving, he was like doing like this with a really stiff neck. And I'm like, oh my God, he's got meningitis. Now, I also had no medical insurance at all because we were kind of poor. And so I had to make a choice. And I'm looking at my child and I'm saying, okay, I think you have viral meningitis, not bacterial meningitis. Now, viral meningitis is something they really can't treat, and it just runs the course. Bacterial meningitis, they can do something and save your child's life. And I'm like, I'm going to say 95% chance of viral, 5% chance of bacterial. But am I going to take the chance on that 5%? And I had to say no. I want my child to live. Went to the hospital. And it was quite an unpleasant experience, believe me. So that's another long story. But anyway, after they sort of tortured him with, in a few different ways, they said he had bacterial meningitis. And I'm like, he had viral meningitis. And I'm like, okay. Well, that bill, I believe that bill ran around $26,000. And I didn't have any medical insurance. Well, my son's life is worth a car. If I'd buy a car for $26,000, I'd save my son's life for $26,000. Of course, the trip to the hospital actually didn't save his life because he had viral meningitis, and they really didn't do anything except after they decided he didn't have bacterial meningitis, spinal tap. So that's what I was trying to think of. They did end up screwing up the first spinal tap and ended up doing 2 spinal taps on my 3-week-old baby. So it was horrible. Anyway, after all that, then they go, oh, we don't need to give him any medication because he's got viral meningitis. And then he just recovered. So no, I didn't actually have to go to the hospital and put him through that and lose $26,000, but I did because his life was at stake. It turned out, however, that the Children's Hospital, I took him to Children's Hospital in Washington, D.C. There was some kind of fund for indigent parents, and they paid the $26,000 off. So I didn't know that at the time, but I was very happy when it happened. So she had the responsibility to make sure her son, who is, even if it's a foster son, was well cared for, and that she would do everything to make sure he was safe. And she did not do that. And what part of her excuse was we didn't have insurance, which I don't understand it because he's still a foster child. He's not even adopted yet. So the foster care system is responsible. Something about I don't have a Social Security card and he didn't get Medicaid. Well, what was he under when he was with a other foster parent? He had to have medical insurance. I don't get it. I really don't understand it, but I don't care, because I don't care if you have nothing. When your child collapses on the floor and stops breathing and is struggling, you call 911. You don't take him. You don't play around in the house for 2 hours and then take him to an urgent care center. Sorry, I don't agree with it. Okay, so now let me go on to the actual story of what happened, because it cannot be ignored. And I think what's happened now is that because they've claimed that she didn't have, good counsel and stuff like this, he could have died of something else rather than negligence. And what they're saying is he had Pica, maybe. By the way, maybe. Let me explain what Pica is. Let me pull this up here. Okay, so Pica is an eating disorder, which the person eats things that are not usually considered food. All right, they might eat dirt, clay, rocks, paper, ice, crayons, hair, paint chips, chalk, and feces. You might. All right. Now, and why might that child eat that? He might have an iron deficiency, some kind of anemia, lead poisoning. He might have developmental problems like autism, might have obsessive compulsive disorder, or stress. Pica is often seen in kids living in poverty or those who have been abused or neglected. Now, the foster parent before her said he didn't do these things. Some people came forth after the fact, like a couple friends from church, and said, oh, yeah, he did. I don't know that that's true. She's claiming he started doing that. And maybe he started doing that with her. I don't know. So the claim is that he self-ingested excessive salt. That's kind of the concept behind this. And he died of salt poisoning through his own pica issues. Now, first of all, I'm going to say this too. You're a responsible parent and your child is acting in a bizarre way. First of all, you hurry them to get some kind of psychological and medical help, which wasn't done. Next thing, if you actually see your child doing these weirdo things, you get to do something like lock your cabinet up. There are people who do this all the time. They lock their cabinet up. They don't have things accessible to a child. Let's say you have a pantry, for example, and she did have a pantry with salt in it, supposedly on a higher shelf, that she thinks maybe he got to. Hey, you got a pantry? You can lock the pantry door, and your child can knock it into the pantry. You can lock your refrigerator, and your child can knock it into the refrigerator. So if you've got a child who is acting out in a way that is going to harm him, you have to prevent that from happening, okay? I'm sorry. If you're going to take on the responsibility of parenting a child, that is what you have to do. And if you don't do it, you are neglectful. Okay, so now let me just read some of the things that actually were said, okay? Because this is what now we're not hearing about, as she has now been exonerated and declared innocent of any wrongdoing. Okay, listen to this. Child Protective Services Jody Mendoza, a social worker, testified Overton told her that Andrew ate the chili. He wanted more, but she did not want to give him any more. Rather than giving him more chili, Overton gave him a glass of water mixed with an unknown amount of chili powder. Okay? Overton told Mendoza that Andrew started drinking the mixture. When he started drinking the mixture, he was kicking and screaming. After he finished drinking it, he stumbled to the floor and threw up. Andrew told Overton that he was cold, and then he stopped talking and became lethargic. All right here, something's wrong. You take him to the hospital, or you call 911, which is even better. Andrew would not respond to Overton's question, so she called Larry to come home. Okay, so now your child is very, very ill. Something's wrong. He's collapsed on the floor. You call your husband and say, hey, can you come home? Because he's lying on the floor like this. Overton said that Andrew was in shock. If your kid is in shock, 911 it. So she wrapped a blanket around him. And when Larry arrived, they put him in the car and drove him to that urgent care center. En route to the center, that's when he stopped breathing. Okay. Now, Overton told Mendoza that Andrew was fine, they had quotes around it, earlier and did not have any signs of being sick. Okay. If that's true, if that child has no signs of being sick, and after he drinks this crap you gave him, he collapses on the floor, that's a sign that you just did something to him. This is not a sign that something went downhill. You just did something to him. And you should go, oh my God, what have I done? What's wrong? You can even think maybe he had an allergic reaction. People have allergic reactions to things like maybe the chili thing made his throat swell. Call 911. For God's sakes, your child has just collapsed. Didn't do it. All right. Anyway, when he got to the hospital, eventually, he had swelling of the brain, bleeding inside the brain, bleeding around the brain. That could have been caused by high levels of sodium or trauma. There was also some issues of some signs of abuse, which I'm not going to get into, but places on his body that theoretically he couldn't do to himself. So somebody may have abused him. Of course, he's got a bunch of kids around him, so I always take that a little bit with a grain of salt. All right, now, it had a very high sodium content. Okay, later on, they're going to claim that he got sodium, like an sodium IV, IV when he went to the urgent care center, and that made his sodium higher. So, but regardless, even if that were true, why did he suddenly keel over? Okay. And yeah, okay, I'm not really buying that. But anyway, all right. Now let's read some more about what happened. All right. Andrew was well until they returned home. This is earlier in the day. Overton told Dr. Rata, so this is different people she's telling the story to, that on the way to the chiropractor, Andrew was upset because he wanted to eat at McDonald's. But because he was misbehaving, Overton told him he could eat when they got home. So the other children got to eat at McDonald's and he did not. Overton told Dr. Rata that she gave Andrew some chili. There's quotes on that. Supposedly she calls things chili when she mixes some, any meat mixture with some chili powder, which I find a little odd. Again, I find that odd because this is a 4-year-old child, and a lot, his previous foster parent said that he wasn't into spice, and I know that I'm a big spice freak, so I keep trying to introduce to my granddaughter spices little by little because I'm like, I want to take you to a Mexican restaurant. I want to take you to an Indian restaurant, an African restaurant. I want you to be a little able to eat some spice, But it's not like it's a natural thing that children just want to wolf down some really spicy food when they're not used to it. So I find it a little odd that you would mix chili powder necessarily into your meat when you're giving it to a 4-year-old kid. But anyway, she said she gave him some chili when they arrived home and he ate a significant amount. When Overton told Andrew to stop eating, he allegedly had a temper tantrum. So she mixed some chili powder with water and told Andrew that if he wanted to eat, he should drink the mixture. What? So he wants to eat, but in order to eat again, he's got to drink this horrible mixture of water with chili in it. Then she says he drank the water with chili powder to her surprise. Oh, well, and another part of this whole story is that she says that he liked this chili powder, and that's why she put it in there so it would, resemble the food chili, and therefore he'd be satisfied because he got a tasty water. Now she's saying she was surprised that he drank it. And sometime later, he stumbled to the ground and started having difficulty breathing. Oh, so now he's stumbling to the ground and he can't breathe. 911. Had a change in his level of consciousness and felt cold. This is not a temper tantrum. I'm sure, hey, Hannah, I'm sure your other children, wonderful though they were, probably had a temper tantrum here and there. For him to stumble to the ground, have problems breathing, and then lose consciousness and feeling cold is not a temper tantrum. According to Dr. Rata, Overton stated that Andrew stumbled. He was drifting in and out of consciousness. Then she called her husband. Larry arrived within 10 or 15 minutes. So he now had 15 minutes of drifting in and out of consciousness and having trouble breathing. And Dr. Rata stated, they decided then they'd try to warm him in a warm bath. Apparently they didn't want to take him in because they supposedly didn't have medical insurance, or maybe they didn't want anybody to know what Hannah had done. Because I think, if you've done something wrong, you try to hope they will recover from what you've done wrong so that you don't end up in prison for abuse. All right. And so they did this warm thing, which didn't work at all. And then they decided to take him to the urgent care center, and then he stopped breathing en route. Okay. Now, let's see. What else do we have here? I'm looking through some of the other interesting points here. All right. Eventually, this was called that they testified. Fernandez, this is one of the people that testified at the trial, that Andrew's death was non-accidental. Yet it was non-accidental. If she gave him something to put him into that state of shock and kill him, it's not an accidental death. He classified the manner of death as homicide at the hands of another, death at the hands of another. Then we go on here, some more testifying. Overton testified that Andrew was obsessed with eating, that at every meal he ate more than her other children. Okay, guess what? A child can't eat more than your other children if you give him a plate of food. You can, if that child is having trouble stopping eating, then what you do is each child gets a plate of food, and you don't leave food on the table. So supposedly he keeps grabbing it. So maybe he ate a little more, because a child who's been neglected and abused in his life may think, want to eat more food because it makes him feel comforted. It makes him feel like he feels like he's never going to get more food. Like he's got to get it now or he'll be out of food. Won't be fed again. So that is a problem with some children who've been abused and neglected. So you have to work with that. If she took him into a store, she had to put him in the shopping cart so he would not eat off the floor. Okay, that's reasonable to do. Overton stated that she fed Andrew 3 meals a day and snacks. Overton explained that when Andrew had been in her home longer, Andrew was having more and more issues of eating off the floor. I'm sorry, but how much food do you have on your floor? I mean, I've never had a child eat off the floor because the food isn't on it. What? That doesn't even make sense to me. I mean, we do have that 3-second rule. You drop something on the floor, you go, yeah, okay. Yeah, big deal. I mean, that is not what I would call eating off the floor. But if your child is eating off the floor, then you're leaving food on the floor. I don't know what the heck I can say about that. I don't buy that. Anyway, okay, then she said he was getting into the trash and eating the cat food. That can happen. All right. If that happens, you have to then prevent him from doing it. You have to have trash cans he can't get into, put in a location. Remember that pantry? You can do that. You can lock up the trash if you need to. If you have cat food, instead of leaving dry food out, you have to stand there with your cat and give the cat food and watch the cat eat the food. That's what you do when you have a child who's got some kind of weird problem. All right. When Overton caught Andrew eating something inappropriate, she took away one of his privileges, which I think is really wrong. That is not how you handle it. And she needed some psychological help understanding how to handle this. She gave him a timeout, sending him to his bed until he could calm down, and not allowing him to have a snack or dessert. So when she saw him eat something he shouldn't, then she would not let him have his snack and not let him have his dessert. And, then he became upset because when he was not allowed to eat the food he wanted to eat. And I'm going to say that's not the cat food. She claimed that she informed the social worker that Andrew was eating inappropriately and excessively, and that then supposedly they were going to get a doctor to look into it. All right. Then she had this car accident on September 12th. She had a car accident. And so she was injured. She suffered whiplash. Her face was bruised. Her front teeth were loose and her lip was busted. Okay. So according to Overton, from that point forward, she was really not out of bed. Overton recalled that Andrew was very destructive and thought it was funny when he broke her other children's toys. Okay, if you cannot care for your children because you cannot get out of bed, then you have to get somebody in your house to help you. You're involved in a church that everybody helps everybody. You have somebody come and spend the day with you if need be, when your husband is not in the house. You get someone to help. You get your mother to help, your sister to help, some church lady to help, somebody to help. Because if you can't watch your foster child who is having problems, you are not, again, a neglectful parent. So now he thought it was funny when he broke her other children's toys. Well, because he's got anger issues, obviously. Overton alleged that the majority of the toys that Hamill sent over for Andrew were broken. So supposedly when the foster mother sent him over to her house, she sent him with toys that he loved, especially the Spider-Man toy. And there was this claim. Here's this claim here. So when Andrew broke a sibling's toys, Overton would take one of Andrew's toys away for the day. And Overton stated that she told Hamill that she took away his Spider-Man toy for a day and then she gave it back. Overton denies telling Hamill that she broke his toy. In other words, you break my daughter's toys, I'll break your toys, that kind of thing. And I understand the anger and frustration could cause one to do that. That in itself, I'm not saying makes you a horrible parent. It just makes you a very frustrated parent. All right. So then apparently Overton testified that Andrew also had mosquito bites on his arms that he picked until they became infected. However, according to Overton, she could not take Andrew to the doctor because he did not have insurance. Here we go with this insurance issue again. She claimed she could try to get Medicaid for Andrew before the car accident, but couldn't because she didn't have his Social Security card, again, which I don't understand what the heck this is all about. Overton's other child apparently also had a mosquito bite that was infected, so she took that other child to the doctor and got medication, then gave it to Andrew. Okay, she said when she tried to give him the medicine, he spit it back at her. And then she gave up on that because she was not feeling well because of the accident. Okay. And then she said that he would go into fits, throw himself on the floor, bang his head. And then she would send him into his room to stay there until he calmed down. And some people will note that there was a point where that supposedly he pooped in his bed, and then the family had to take the mattress and get rid of it. And then they burned the sheets. It looked like they burned the sheets which was really weird, on a grill, not like in a fire pit, but on a grill. So I don't understand that. And then he had this board for the bed, the board that goes underneath the mattress, and when you have a bunk bed, and made him sleep there. Now that again is not necessarily terrible, because if they put a sleeping bag down and he slept on it, I don't have any issue with that. So a lot of people point that out. I'm like, if that happens, use a sleeping bag, it's not a big deal. It really isn't. So I don't have a problem with that. Then it said okay, so here's another situation. On October 1st, 2006, Larry took the children, except for Andrew, to church. Why doesn't Andrew get to go to church with the other kids and go to his classes, his Sunday school? Overton stayed home with Andrew, and they watched cartoons together, supposedly. Overton stated she fell asleep. In other words, you're not watching this 4-year-old disturbed child. And she alleged that Andrew had gotten into the refrigerator and had eaten an unknown amount of food. Well, that's good you didn't lock the refrigerator up, which you might have to do. And then she became very upset about this because he wanted to keep eating, and she told him he had to stay in his room until Larry came home to talk to him. And then that's when he pooped all over all the mattress and everything like that. So it goes on about that, about the sheets being burned and so on and so forth. So eventually, let's see. This is another story about Overton and Larry, and they went to a Mexican restaurant. Andrew did not like Popeye's chicken, which is odd. However, he liked spicy food such as jalapenos and salsa. Really? Okay. When they returned home, that's when she prepared the chili. He was hungry again. Overton described the chili as a beef stew with some stuff added to it. She referred to any mixture as chili, and the ingredients she used to make the chili were condensed soup and some Zatarain's seasoned salt. And by the way, somewhere along the way here, she claims that she didn't know that this Zatarain's, it's a Cajun thing, seasoned salt was salty. Seasoned salt. It's called salt with some seasoning. Now, just to show you, I went on Amazon to check this out. Okay, so here's what she supposedly sprinkled into everything. And okay, this is the seasoning. Okay, and it says right on the back, this is what you turn. It says right there, ingredients. Okay, and if you look at the ingredients up close, what is the number one ingredient? Oh yeah, salt. And of course, when you put spices and salt like chili pepper and paprika, red pepper, a little bit of, it's going to be just a flavoring to the whole thing of salt. It's called salt. All right. She claims she didn't know it was all salt. So anyway, it goes on here. Let's see what else we got here. Oh, now listen. Okay. So here's one of her claims. Now she keeps falling asleep, apparently. So Overton on October 2nd, Overton fed the children breakfast, and then they went to bed to watch cartoons for 2 hours. So they were sitting in bed watching cartoons. Larry went to work. Overton fell asleep. And when she awoke, Andrew was in the pantry and was on a stool where all the sugar was, and on the shelf that had unsweetened chocolate, sugar, and a spice rack. Overton claimed that Andrew had been eating something from the pantry, but that she did not know what it was. Okay, I mean, he's a 4-year-old kid. They're not really that clever at not showing what they ate, like they drop it on the floor and all that stuff. Is he really climbing up on what? Again, why is he in your pantry? If you know he goes in there, you lock the dang door up. But now he's supposedly climbing up on he's able to get to your spice rack when you know he has a supposed problem. All right, so she put him in a timeout for 3 minutes. Then Andrew told her that he wanted to eat. However, she wanted him to wait until Larry came home, and they take them to McDonald's for lunch. And then that's when he had another fit, and so on and so forth. So they went to McDonald's, and Andrew started crying he wanted some food, but he wasn't going to have any food because he'd already eaten at home. And then we had more pooping and stuff like that. Okay. You wanted more chili. Okay, I want to get to the part where she also gets some more information on this. Um, let's see. Okay, this is the claim she made later on. I had this cup of water and I put a couple of sprinkles of Zatarain's in the water. I filled the water up the rest of the way, and then I thought, you know what? That's a little too much. So I put a little bit what was in the cup into a sippy cup. So she's saying basically it's just water and only one sprinkle, one little drop of the Zatarain's. And according to Overton, Andrew took a couple sips and then asked her to put more seasoning in his cup. Overton stated that when she was attempting to pour more seasoning into the cup, Andrew knocked it out of her hand. Andrew was unsure she put more seasoning in the cup before Andrew grabbed the cup and started drinking again. Overton did not think that Andrew drank all of the mixture. So she's now claiming that he forced her to put more in, and then he grabbed it, and then she didn't know she had dumped the whole container in, and then he slugged the whole thing down. This is all her claim. All right, so then that's when he starts stumbling around on the floor and saying he was cold and throwing up and was acting like he was essentially dying. And then she claims here that he was, just freaking out. So then she goes into, okay, they do the bath thing again. And they do the self-home stuff that doesn't work. And so then, so let's see, what was this? Oh, here. Overton decided that Andrew was sick at some point, you see. So she and Larry began discussing whether to take Andrew to the doctor. They talked about calling 911, but decided against doing it for two reasons. One, they didn't have insurance, and two, his vital signs were allegedly normal, and they wouldn't get lights and sirens if they called an ambulance. What? What? Say, my son isn't breathing. My son is lying on the floor. He's cold. He's not breathing. He's in and out of consciousness. Yeah, you're going to get sirens. What are you going to do? Say, my son is actually just doing dandy. So can you just stop by? That's what they're trying to say, because his signs were normal. What signs were normal? She checked his vital signs, she says. He was breathing funny, but she checked his pulse, examined his pupils, counted his breath, and thought they were normal. So therefore, she would have to tell them that, and they wouldn't show up with any sirens. Well, I'm sorry, but you want to get somebody to your house, you just tell your kid isn't breathing properly, and they'll be there in a heartbeat. So it's just, again, okay. According to Overton, at this point, Andrew became less and less responsive, and she realized that this situation was serious. Oh, really? It took you like hours, which is why they convicted her. So then they discussed whether they should take him to the doctor again. All right. So let's see. Okay. So they decided, no, wait a minute. All right. Until this point, she asserted she did not realize he was seriously ill because other kids had such symptoms when they had the flu. Well, remember she said he didn't have any symptoms earlier? He just, after he drank this stuff, that's when he fell over. He got the flu, like when he drank the drink. He just suddenly got the flu. She knows this is nonsense. This is garbage. So then, before taking Andrew to the doctor, she called her paramedic friend again to ask if there was some weird flu going on, but she didn't answer the phone. Oh, how convenient. On cross-examination, Overton agreed that if she called 911, members of her church would have helped her pay the medical bills. Larry and Overton then got in the car. They drove to the urgent care center, and she was in the back with him, and that's when he started to stop breathing, and then eventually got to the hospital, but not because they took him there. And so, yeah, so he died. All right, now, I'm going to say, first of all, as far as I know, there's no evidence, and this is interesting that this is now being put out there as evidence, that he had pica, which is a desire to eat all this stuff. The foster parent said she never saw it, and if this was true and ongoing, she should have done something to prevent him from eating things he shouldn't eat. That's all. That's what you do with pica. I mean, it's a lot of work, but that's what happens when you take in a foster child who's been in an abusive and negligent situation, and you have all these other kids you got to take care of. You have to make a proper decision, and I will fault social services for not. Maybe they should not have allowed that child to go to her home without a whole lot of She did go through some classes. That's just true. She went some classes, went through classes that said how you should treat a child and not, force, not punish him for things. She went through those classes. But a lot of times they just downplay things because they want to get that kid into a permanent home. So they just don't tell you half the truth of what you're getting into. And so now they said, oh, he had pica. Well, there's no proof he had pica, first of all. And secondly, if he had it, that wasn't necessarily what happened that day. There was no proof he ingested anything on his own. And he was fine up until, if he had ingested a whole bunch of stuff prior to that, why did he suddenly keel over when she gave him this water? Why did that happen in an instant? And why, if that happened in an instant, suddenly he wasn't just having a normal temper tantrum. He was having severe problems. And she knew he was having issues. And moment after moment after moment, she delayed doing anything about it till the fact that she even took him to a place that couldn't handle an emergency, and he dies. So, in my opinion, she is responsible for the death of this child. She did neglect taking him to getting him proper medical care. There's no question in my mind that is true. So I don't believe she should be let off the hook on that. Secondly, I don't think there's any proof that he ingested this on his own. So something happened at that moment, and they can say all they want about, oh, that isn't really what happened to him. He died of excess salt in his system. There was nothing else he died of. Okay. So if it got there, it had to get there somehow. And when she gave him what she did claim, she put that salt mixture in, and she doesn't know how much she actually ended up dumping in and giving him. She was the one who handed it to him. And of course, we don't know it was handed to him. It may have been forced, and that's another whole issue, was this abuse that she got so frustrated. She's like, well, here, you take this, you drink this, kid. And she did she hold his head and pour it into him? I don't know. Did he also choke, aspirate? I don't know. So I don't know what happened here, but I know that she said he was fine up until that moment. So in my opinion, as a criminal profiler, that was a defining moment when this child became critically ill and died within 3 hours. And you can't tell me that she didn't do anything and that she was totally innocent on all of this. And she didn't get a medical care. She didn't call 911 because what? She won't pay the bill. I guess his life wasn't worth it to her. So, I have a problem with that. This was overturned. I have a problem with it being declared innocent. I don't think any of that's true. Now, one could say maybe she shouldn't have had a life sentence. You can fight on that one, that she became an overly stressed foster parent who freaked out and did something she shouldn't have done, that she was afraid then to go to the doctor, call 911 because she would be accused of that. So she did all these things she didn't mean to do all these things, but she did them because she was so frustrated and overwrought and falling apart. Okay. She gets 10 years. Maybe the 7 years she served, you could say, okay, that was acceptable. But I do not believe in any way, shape, or form that this should have been overturned based on the fact that she's totally innocent. It wasn't overturned on that. It was improper counsel or whatever the usual, thing is, that she didn't get good enough defense. Also, they're saying that the prosecution could have called somebody that would talk about Pica, and they didn't call them. I mean, because they could have presented other possibilities. Well, that's the defense, in my opinion. That's their job. So I think there's a lot of politics going on in here, and people wanted to look good at this point in time with all the pressure. So that's why they're all like, okay, well, we think we've done something, with the prosecution. No, they were mean. They were too mean to her. And so now we're going to let her go, and we're going to give her some money, and we're going to, and we're say, sorry, he had some weird disease that hasn't been proven, but okay. So anyway, that's my thought on this case. So I just think that, no, she was not innocent of what happened. But again, I do want to point out, though, that social services and foster care system needs to do better and not put in children into homes where people are not prepared, and not work with them to understand what they're getting into. Because taking in a child who's been in foster care can be very, very difficult because of it's such a tough job, and the child can come in with so many emotional problems that can really affect the rest of the family, and then everything goes to hell in the whole family. Also, the fact that some children with severe attachment disorder can be psychopathic, and then that's a disaster as well. So, I've had one bad experience with foster care, and I've had one very good experience in the sense that I've got a wonderful son that came from the system, although they didn't warn me either, and they didn't tell me anything, and it was just fortunate that we were able to bring him into our home and give him love, and he's been a wonderful son, and I'm very, very happy that he became part of our family. So, but I just think that foster care system needs to step up their game in that, and help people understand what they're getting into. Children do need homes, but they don't need a home that's going to get them killed. So anyway, that's my thoughts on this. Thank you for being here. Please do subscribe to the channel if you have never done so. Hit the little bell and you'll get notifications of other stuff I'm doing. Also check my playlist for cases that I might have already done that you might be interested in. And you can always click below for Patreon and join my Patreon community and also support the channel. And so anyway, thank you for being here. I appreciate it, and I hope you learned something from the show.